You are standing on your driveway on a Tuesday morning in May. Between the cracks, a dandelion pushes up, its leaves spreading like a hand. You pour boiling water on it. Nothing happens for 2 seconds. Then the leaves begin to wilt. The green turns yellow. By tomorrow, the whole plant is brown and dead. It took 90 seconds. No chemicals, no gloves, no waiting weeks. I have spent 20 years removing weeds from driveways without buying a single bottle of poison. My grandmother taught me this method in her garden in Kyoto, where we never used chemicals on anything. Today, I am going to show you the exact technique that kills a weed at the root in minutes. The key is understanding what boiling water does to the plant itself, not just the leaf. Stay with me, because by the end, you will understand a second step that most people skip, the one that stops the weed from coming back for months. Here is the moment your weed dies. You fill a kettle with water and bring it to a full rolling boil, 100 degrees Celsius, no cooler. You walk to the driveway crack and pour it slowly directly at the base of the weed, where the stem meets the soil. The boiling water does not burn the leaf. It denatures the proteins inside every cell. The cell walls collapse. The plant cannot hold itself together anymore. Now, here is where most people stop. They watch the weed brown and think they are done. But they are not. The root is still alive underneath, gathering strength to sprout again. This is the part I do that changes everything. Within 30 seconds of the boiling pour, you take cold tap water and spray it directly on the same spot. The rapid temperature shift from 100 degrees to cold creates a shock inside the root tissue itself. The cells that survive the heat cannot handle the sudden contraction. They rupture from the inside. The weed is not just dead. The root is destroyed. Visible yellowing begins within minutes. Complete desiccation happens within 1 day. You see the proof immediately. You see the kill. But prevention is where this method becomes unbeatable. And that is the secret you will use every month to keep your driveway permanently clear. The boiling water has done its job. The weed is ruptured, dying. Its cells collapsed from shock. Now, the 30 seconds of cold spray are finished, and you are standing in the most crucial window. What happens in the next hour decides whether this spot stays clear for months or sprouts again in a week. This is where the salt and vinegar come in. And I learned this part from my grandmother in Kyoto. She never used chemicals on her garden pads either. Just salt, vinegar, and one principle: make the soil itself hostile. Here is what I do. I take coarse rock salt, not table salt, the larger crystals, and I pour it directly into the crack. The bigger grains dissolve slowly over weeks, releasing sodium ions that linger long after the water has moved on. Salt does something most people do not understand. It raises the salinity of the soil water so high that the roots cannot drink. The plant sits in wet soil but dies of thirst, a condition called physiological drought that I have watched work for 20 years. Now I take household vinegar, the 5% kind from any supermarket shelf, and I pour it over the salt in the crack. Watch what happens. The vinegar fizzes against the salt and the concrete minerals, and that fizzing pushes the acid deeper. The acetic acid pulls moisture out of any remaining plant tissue through osmosis. Visible wilting happens within hours on a hot day. On a sunny afternoon above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, I have seen the surviving roots brown and collapse by evening. Here is where I add one small detail. A few drops of dish soap into the vinegar first. The soap breaks the surface tension, so the liquid reaches into the tightest cracks where the smallest roots hide. The combination is the key. Vinegar kills what is visible, salt attacks what survives below, and together they transform that crack into a place nothing wants to grow. You are now looking at a months-long barrier, not a temporary kill. Heavy rain will eventually wash the salt away, which is why I reapply in spring and again after summer storms. But that targeted poison in a confined space stays lethal far longer than boiling water alone ever could. The weed will not return from this spot for 4 to 6 months. I have measured this on my own driveways countless times. Now, there is one problem I need you to know about before we move forward. What works perfectly in a driveway crack can devastate the garden bed 10 feet away if salt drains sideways into it. Precision matters. The barrier lives only where you intend it, in the crack itself, nowhere else. But there is still one type of weed this combination struggles with: the deep, stubborn roots that simply will not quit. For those survivors, I reach for a tool my grandfather carried, and that is coming next. Now that salt and vinegar have done their work, watch for the survivors, the ones that grow back. These are the deep-rooted ones, the ones my grandmother called the stubborn children. When thermal shock and the barrier fail, the root is still there, intact, waiting below. I reach for a tool I have used every week for 20 years, the grout knife. This is not a pull. Pulling brings dormant seeds to the light, and you lose. A grout knife is thin, 3 millimeters, maybe 4, with a flat steel blade sharp enough to cut paper. I insert it vertically into the grout line, right against the weed stem, angled slightly toward the root. The dandelion stores all its energy in that taproot, anywhere from 15 to 30 centimeters deep. Cut above that reserve, and the plant wakes up and regrows from stored carbohydrate within weeks. Here is where it gets interesting. The hypocotyl, the zone just below soil where stem becomes root. That zone is the weakest point on the plant, the place where it cannot regenerate once severed cleanly. I press the blade down and laterally, 2 to 4 centimeters below the surface, in one steady motion. One motion. Not 2, not 3. 1. Because each dig loosens grout and opens the joint wider. You feel the resistance drop. The taproot has separated. Now lift the crown and the severed root together. Remove them entirely. Do not leave the crown behind. Dock, especially, will regenerate from crown tissue. I have watched it happen. Carbon steel holds the sharpest edge. A dull blade crushes tissue instead of cutting it. Crushed roots regenerate. I dry the blade immediately after use. Carbon steel rusts if you leave it wet. The cut is clean. The root is gone. The void is empty. Now I pack polymeric sand into the joint. Not regular builder's sand, polymeric, which binds and resists moisture. This seal closes the pocket where new seeds would find germination, light, and water. The stubborn survivor is done. But here is what most people miss entirely. That driveway will stay clear for weeks. Then new weeds arrive, from wind, from tracked-in soil, from time. One treatment is not forever. And that is where the real solution lives. With the grout knife work finished, most gardeners think the job is done. They wait for the next weed to appear, then react again. Here is where almost everyone misses the actual secret I promised you. The secret is not the thermal shock. It is not the salt vinegar paste. The secret is doing it again and again, every single month. I have a calendar on my kitchen wall, marked on the first Saturday. That day, I fill a kettle, 2 liters of water, boiled. I walk my driveway with that kettle and pour it slowly into every crack. Not splashing, slow, deliberate. The water sinks deep into the joints. I spend 5 minutes total. My grandmother did this every 4 weeks in Kyoto. She never fought weeds. She simply never let them start. Here is the mechanism that changes everything. Weed seeds are waiting in your cracks. They sit there dormant, viable for years, brought by wind and tracked soil. But they need one thing to germinate: a quiet window of opportunity. A week where the soil stays moist and undisturbed, where they can sprout. When you pour boiling water into those cracks once a month, you close that window. You kill any seedling before it roots. You kill any seed that begins to swell. Do this for 3 months, and the seed bank starts to empty. Do it for 6 months, and your driveway behaves like it is permanently sealed. It is not sealed. It is just managed, consistently. Now look at what we walked through together. The thermal shock broke the established weed. The salt vinegar barrier poisoned the soil. The grout knife removed the stubborn taproot that survived both. But none of those matter if you stop, if you wait for the next problem. The monthly ritual is the frame that holds all three inside a permanent system. You are standing on your driveway on a cool Saturday morning. The kettle steams in your hand. You pour it slowly into the first crack. You feel the heat radiating up from the joint as the water finds the soil. No chemicals, no products to buy. Just time, just discipline, just routine. This is how my grandmother kept her garden immaculate for 40 years. I want to know, what is your first reaction to the idea of a monthly ritual? Does it feel like burden, or does it feel like freedom? I read every comment you leave, and I mean that. The most permanent protection is the one you do not have to buy, only choose to keep.